Hello and welcome to eCommerce Matters, brought to you by BlackCurve. We help e-commerce businesses make pricing decisions. Today's title is Your Pricing Checklist. We'll cover what you need to do today, every week, every month, every year. We have got you covered. I'm joined by Mr. Checklist himself, Dr. Rob Horton. He'll probably disagree with that, but hey ho, let's keep on going as we always do by getting a wrong introduction for him. I'm Philip Huthwaite, the founder of BlackCurve, and without further ado, shall we get pricing, Rob?
Yeah, sure. Surely it's Dr. Checklist.
Dr. Checklist. Okay, we'll go.
Mr. Checklist. Okay. Yeah, well, you know my love and ability to follow process, Philip. So this is exactly the episode for my expertise.
For those of you who don't know Rob, he's the creative genius, I should say, in the BlackCurve world, and we've tried to put him on rails, and that kind of creativity and process collides, and you can sometimes create a Frankenstein. But actually, I think
I've reached a point where I'll admit it is useful. I used to be fully anti-process, and now I've realised that was very naive, and now I still have a somewhat standoffish approach to it, but I recognise its benefits when you're trying to scale a business.
Right, people, this podcast is ending now. My life is complete.
Yeah,
Rob has admitted. I mean, I'm quite speechless. So my life...
3 years to hear that.
I think certainly we are polar opposites when it comes to the process. Oh, hey ho. Well, enough about that. So today's title is Your Pricing Checklist, and I'm hoping, Rob, because we've not spoken about it this week, I'm hoping you've got a prop. Have you got a prop?
Yeah, I got a prop.
What have you got?
It's a bit meta. See if you can guess what it is.
It's a jar with some white things in it. Well, I can't see what is it? Is that milk? What is that?
No, it's a sourdough starter.
Oh.
And there is a reason, apart from the fact that, as I was just saying to Philip, I've joined the lockdown sourdough crew. This is episode 30, and this is our final one in the first season. And I thought the starter was appropriate because when you're feeding it every day, because it's a living thing, it's got yeast, natural yeast in it that propagates, and that's what makes your bread rise. You take some stuff out and you put some new stuff in, and then it gets better and better and better. And that's what we're doing. So we're coming to the end of like our first round through this, and then we're going to keep some stuff. We're going to glue some stuff, like possibly the mattresses behind me, and on to bigger and better things. So that's my prop.
I like it a lot. Although it does mean that maybe episode 31, you're going to have to turn up with an actual sourdough, or have you just eaten that?
I've just eaten it.
Thanks for sharing.
I'll send you one.
Oh, that would be nice.
Actually, I'll send you some starter, because then you can make your own. It's much better fresh.
Oh, exciting stuff. Exciting. All right, then, would you want to see? I've got 2 props today, because why not? Shall I show you the first one, the sensible one? Okay. Right. Yeah. So I have a 1-year-old who we've been weaning for some time now. And we basically, to start this process, we got given a checklist of how to do it. 5-step weaning plan. Why are you laughing at me? Honestly,
this is so far out my level of experience.
No, but it's like we didn't. This was our second child, and to be honest, the second child gets not as much diligence as the first child. But we actually decided to. We had a bit of trouble kind of weaning the first child, so we thought, let's go back to basics. Let's look at a checklist. Let's work out how can we create less pain for ourselves. How can we make it an easier process? And we read this checklist, and actually it helped us a lot. So so I've brought that. But then I thought, do you know what? That's a bit boring to bring as a prop, especially for episode 30. So I decided that I would become a pirate. Because pricing is choppy waters in e-commerce. There's lots of competition. There's lots of competitors. Are you screen grabbing this now? A second. It's choppy waters. So I've got a pirate's hat because you've got to keep slinging. You've got to bring order, and also it's a bit of fun. Why not? Who doesn't like dressing up?
Right, that's made it. I'm out. Kill it. Episode over. Done.
So we've both ended quite happy, actually. And we're only a few minutes in. Right, enough hilarity.
Fantastic. That's what I
Right, let's give some value to our listeners, shall we? So,
beyond you and a pirate man.
beyond this, that is going to haunt me for a long time, isn't it? That
It
one.
is when I put it in Discord in 20 seconds.
Just wait until after the podcast. Come on, you're
All right,
recording
all right,
live
all
now.
right.
Recording live, because then that gives me an opportunity to at least write back to people's abuse, so, rather than waiting
all right,
50
all right.
minutes or so. Right. So your pricing checklist. Where should we start? Should we start? I think just to set the scene. When we decided to come to this title, a lot of the times we get asked, you know, what should I do on a daily basis? Where should I focus my time? What questions should I ask in order to support me to make pricing decisions and support me in my operations outside of pricing? Because pricing does have a direct relationship on, for example, you know, what products you should buy, not just simply what the price should be on a day-to-day basis, to give kind of one example. And then also as we find that people are moving tactically through their day-to-day operations, suddenly that gives them a bit of breathing room to sit back and go, well, hang on a minute, what questions should I be asking myself more strategically? And naturally those questions are asked, you know, whether it be on a monthly review cycle, a quarterly review cycle, or even a yearly review cycle. Although if anybody's doing year planning at the moment, I might sort of scratch my head and think you might want to shorten those planning.
Investors still like it.
Planning. Yes, they do. No comment. But you know what I mean. So we're in a period of shift, and that shift is happening constantly, and you should be assessing on a regular basis kind of how you want to strategically optimize your pricing. And we like to think we're pricing experts, so we're gonna focus mainly on what your pricing checklist should be. And I think it might be worth I don't know if you'll agree, a lot of people that come to us initially are thinking very tactically. They've got you know, a set of requirements that they want to do, whether it be from a BlackCurve point of view, you know, I want to get more visibility of the market, or I actually want to automate some of my pricing decisions on a daily basis. So I thought it might be worth starting with some of the daily checklists. Do you reckon we should start there?
I think it's worth. I think it's just to drill into that previous point a little bit before we go into the tactics, because I think it's people either come from either end. They're either very, very tactical and competitor driven, or they're completely in the strategic. And I think what we're trying to do with this thing is join the two and show you can marry them up. Because I think people often have, like you say, have yearly, 6 monthly, quarterly business goals, and then they have tactical pricing that they're doing on the daily, and they're not ensuring that those two are aligned or harmonious. So I think to set the scene for all of it, and we're not going to go into it in this because we've done a lot of episodes on kind of the top end and the bottom end, but you want to get those kind of, right, what are your business goals? Are you going for sales growth, or are you going for profitability, right? That kind of question you need to answer, because that will directly affect your tactics, your market positioning, and all the rest of it. And I think it's just worth mentioning before we shoot down into super tactical.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually thinking about it on reflection, maybe we'll treat this as a bit of a yo-yo. So maybe what we'll do is we'll say we'll almost, I'm going to say pricing maturity, but we'll say kind of strategically some questions which business ask, and then we'll go through a daily checklist and a weekly checklist of those, and then we'll pull back and we might throw in some other strategic objectives, and then maybe we'll go back into some sort of daily, weekly, kind of monthly cycle. That sounds a good way of doing it. So a lot of the time, the first question strategically for a business, or when they're embarking on a pricing exercise, is they want to make sure that they have their pulse on the market. They want to make sure that they're aware of their position in the market, and also, and to take that further, once they've done that, they want to react automatically to the market to make sure that their pricing decisions are changed when a competitor changes a product, or they have a relative parity. So if that's your objective as a company to maintain the market position on a day-to-day perspective, what are some of the questions I should be asking myself?
Yeah, sure. So this is, like you say, this is the starting point that most people come to us. The They've got a pretty good idea about who their competition are, where they want to sit within that. And that's your mental benchmark, right? So all your daily questions tend to be around that kind of benchmarking really at that stage. So how is my portfolio positioned? Is it kind of on average where I expect it to be in the marketplace? And then outliers. So is anything looking too cheap or too expensive? There any been any big changes in the market? Kind of, this is where daily blends into weekly a bit depending on the frequency of your market movement, but it's these kind of like top tail the data, large changes, who are my key competitors, how do I line up against them, 5-10 minute job with a dashboard of a morning with a cup of coffee. Just if like we offer that kind of service, I'm sure lots of our competition do as well. Where are you positioned? Does that line up? And that really is your kind of like tactical daily pricing. And there's actually quite a deep reason why it's mainly competitor focused, and it's to do with the kind of the number of data points you get and the rate at which you gather them, because competitor movements obviously happen on the daily, not on necessarily on a daily frequency, but they do happen on the daily, and that someone makes a price change and then you need to react to it, whether automatically, which is often why people turn to us, it's automating these kind of processes, or by hand. Whereas if you start getting into the more data sets required for strategic stuff, you need broader data sets, and that's your sales data, profit and revenue. There's not much point looking at daily data because of weekly sales cycles. It's also marketing data. So if you're looking at return on ad spend, of cost of acquisition, those kind of metrics, to get a decent number of observations to start making strategy, you need to pull back. And this is where you see that first differentiation between tactical kind of fighting in the trenches against the competition to linking it back to a more strategic view.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's a ton of stuff in there, and you can really motor with analysing all the data and get really excited about it. But I think we've covered it on many podcasts that actually, you know, if you are just monitoring what the market is doing, is a sensible starting point.
Yeah, completely valid.
And you've touched upon some of the questions there. You know, knowing your average price difference from the market is actually a really good indicator out of the gate. Even if you're not changing prices that frequently, if you monitor the market, match those products to your products, and over time build up a picture of where you sit in the marketplace, that gives you a good sense of how much, I don't know, pricing power I have, or where, you know, if your sales are good and you're averagely 20% above the average market price, that shows that clearly you have a brand presence, or you're marketing in the right places, or you're attracting the right audience. And also you might have a company goal that might be, you know, I mean, I'm not gonna. I'll get in trouble if I pick the one that I always pick. But you might have a company vision that we always want to be seen as everyday low prices.
I can give you a much better one. In the a lot of VC-backed e-commerce companies have fixed average margin targets, and the pricing people's performance is measured against them, and that obviously is an important thing. So I'll phrase that badly, but that is something that you need to check on the daily against an outlier. It's a benchmark, right? Has anything dropped? Is anything dragging that down? Do I need to look at something? Do I need to discontinue this product because we can no longer hold it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it is. Almost this daily check of my position in the market, and opens up all the layers of questions underneath that. So has my average position moved? By how much? Okay, if it's gone down, as in I'm moving towards the margin, towards the average margin, is that a good thing? If I'm moving away, is that a good thing? Do I need to concern myself about this? And Rob, you mentioned it earlier, unless I'm making it up. You said, I think you said outliers was a term that you mentioned. And so this average price difference from the market, actually, if you do see a change, go and look at those outliers first. So go and see, and we've got a chart in our dashboard which is called market segmentation, and you can very quickly hone in on the products that are a lot more expensive or a lot cheaper than the market average, because you might be surprised at what's in there, and what you're trying to do over time as you move to your daily, weekly cycle is work out which products need to be in the market and which products you can actually get away with being further away. And one thing I might add is that if you overlay a check on, okay, the products that you're a lot cheaper than the market, where are you then in relation to the lowest in the market? Because you win no prizes being the cheapest. Okay, if you're cheaper than the lowest, just raise it. You win no prizes being there, unless it's obviously a strategic objective, which comes back to what we said earlier. Raise it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it, because the daily tasks literally are really about troubleshooting products. So how do you find outliers easily? How do you do that when you're managing 2,000-3,000 SKUs? And then how do you drill in and understand them? Usually in ecom, those outliers are either driven by competitor movements or data errors, to be quite honest, because there is a subset of products that are driven by sales, and you can drive by marketing and the rest of it. But if you're selling FMCG kind of goods, you have to be in this competitive region. And so when things start dropping out of it, or if that shifts dramatically, you need to know, because that's going to not only punish your sales, but it will punish your advertising performance. So you get because Google's tracking it, and you get penalized across the board. So that for me is the kind of daily task. Do my products line up with my strategy? If not, why not?
I like that kind of troubleshooting. You know, you're looking at your market position, and then trying to find where are the outliers, where's the funky bits of data flagged to me, and then you're drilling down into doing product specific analysis. I mean, one of the things that it might be worth us talking about now is some of the weekly cycles. Is that doing this product level analysis, you suddenly might identify that, well, hang on a minute. You know, my market price is being pulled down, but I can't lower it towards the market average. Why is that? And a lot of the time we find it's because a lot of our customers have put in safeguards or minimum pricing rules in there. So this then becomes, onto your weekly cycle, almost, have I got the right rules in place? You know, and that's when you can start to tweak and optimize. And oh right, I didn't realize my minimum price was impacting my ability to follow the market. And actually, I know I've learned that this product is market driven, therefore I need to change my safeguard on these products.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, weekly pricing is for A/B testing of rule sets, understanding your differences in strategy, understanding what works and what doesn't work, aligning that with kind of your KPIs, or however you measure it. For exactly that example, so that example is a really good one, because that's like a really common gotcha in pricing. You're in a very competitive space, the market's moving down, you're getting left behind. You need to have a conversation, but the great thing is with something like BlackCurve, you can test that, right? So you select a subset of products that are hitting that, you put in a rule set to see, all right, well let's lower it a bit, see what happens, measure the results. The reason this is a weekly cycle, or a weekly to monthly, which is what I alluded to earlier, is getting enough observations. It's purely that simple. Very few, if any, of the people we work with are selling enough volume, enough price points really to get good enough observations in a daily period. And to be quite honest, as a human, you probably don't have the time or the mental space to do that. So you want to gather as much data as possible, set it running for 1 week, come back, and then you're excluding all the weekly sales cycle effects that we've talked about. If you go to monthly, then you're excluding payday effect or start of month. And so yes, so just to kind of loop back, daily is products, tactical, problem solving, troubleshooting. Weekly, you're getting into strategic understanding. Sorry, I shouldn't say strategic, understanding of the rules, A/B testing. Is my pricing strategy working for my business in the way I want it, and how do I tweak that?
Yeah, so like who's changed price? How much overlap do I have with certain competitors? Have my competitors delisted certain products that they previously changed before? Why have they done that? Are they entering in new markets, or have they run out of stock?
What happens if I'm not lowest in the market? What happens if I'm third lowest or average? Those kind of questions is what you start building up on a weekly frequency.
Yeah, without reeling off a list of questions, but there's tons of questions you can ask. Is this product market driven or not? Is the product changing price all the time? Are your competitors changing the price loads of the time? It's an indicator that it's market driven. Do I need to worry about the market in this product?
Yeah, the ones I'm really excited about the minute is kind of, how's this affecting my impressions? How is this affecting my return on ad spend? Because there's a really interesting tension between pricing and advertising in that you can lower margin to increase volume through pricing, but then you can lower volume through your ad spend because you've given your ad spend provider less margin to work with, so they can't bid as high, and then your advertising goes down. And it's that kind of emergent process, which, I mean, I can theorize about till the cows come home, but you need to test it in the wild and see the results.
Absolutely. And when do you start looking at performance, as in, you've enacted change, you've been tactical, you've hustled, you might have even automated a lot of this. Mm-hmm. When do you start looking at, well, should I have bothered, or is it working?
Really good question. It's really kind of weekly to monthly. There's a number of there's some really interesting performance effects with pricing that I think we'll cover in much more detail in the new format. But there's definitely a switching on effect when you haven't been. You basically, your portfolio isn't market efficient, and automatic pricing tool will make the bulk of your portfolio market efficient, and that has a load of knock-on effects, including an uplift in sales volume and another load of metrics. After that, again, it's data, number of observations, probably monthly, weekly to monthly. It gets hard and it's very messy because there's so many wheels spinning in e-commerce. So unless you're actually treating, say, pricing as part of your marketing strategy and freezing things out and only testing pricing, it's really hard to unpick what's pricing and what's not pricing. But you certainly can't do it at daily or weekly with intra-week interval, because there's a number of effects that basically mean that you're not comparing like for like. If you're looking at weeks over a month, that's usually quite a good way of doing it, because months tend to be fairly consistent. But then again, if you go to month to month, there's obviously a huge difference between February and July and November. So then you need to really get into the yearly. So weekly or monthly granularity, but over yearly time period. But that really is something that you should be looking at kind of on a monthly basis. Even if you're just saying, yeah, we're on track. Yes, it's having the same effect. Yes, it's stable. It's doing what we want the business to do. The business wants it to do or needs it to do. Leave it be. Come back in a month. But that's kind of the frequency of observation for me there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, a lot of the time, especially with products are selling one or two a day or a handful a week, you've got to let it run the course. But I suppose it comes down to the volume that you're selling a certain product at kind of also dictates that if it's a high volume product, you're selling a lot and you always sell a lot. If that suddenly if that suddenly changes, this is what it comes down to on a daily basis, looking at anomalies and using that to dictate your checklist of things that you look at. If suddenly sales drop off a cliff and it's always selling well, go and look at that product. That's a checklist that you should do. Why is it? It might just simply be because one of your cost prices has changed, and as a result, your margin calculations change, and you just can't change beyond a degree and you've hit a certain market price that you can't follow, or a lot of the time it's something innocuous like that. But when it comes to assessing the performance overall, you do have to wait. You do have to wait sort of a couple of months to assess, has it caused harm, is the first question. So, a like for like sales period, am I down? Because that's and can I rule out other market forces? And if I can rule out other market forces, then you can start to overlay the extra questions.
So I think you've hit on something really key there, and we have done a whole episode on this. But the thing that we're kind of skirting around and haven't said explicitly is that you need to think about pricing as within the whole business, alongside your whole business, not as a separate function. Because when we're saying tactically you should be looking at products on the daily, what we're saying is that if you're a product manager and you are running through the portion of the portfolio you're responsible for, you should be looking at the competitive makeup of your market at the same time as you're looking at kind of sales or stock or supply chain issues or all the rest of it. And it's a piece of the puzzle. And the same with the performance, in that I was getting that with the marketing stuff, but it's really important to view pricing not just as if we can find the products that we can increase margin on, happy days, because that could have a serious negative effect elsewhere in the business that you don't know about. And that's everything from ad spend optimization to your sales team on the ground and existing kind of agreements that they have with people. So it becomes super, super important to think about this all holistically and think not just like, how well is my pricing performing per se, but how well is pricing performing within my business and for my business.
Absolutely. It's not done. It shouldn't be done in a vacuum. It shouldn't be done, in a silo or on its own. It touches upon a load of other areas. And earlier on you mentioned some of the marketing metrics that it supports and contributes to. But also pricing can dictate whether or not you this product's going to sell well or not sell well from a pure revenue and profit point of view. So it touches many areas. I mean, some of the questions that you might want to ask yourself when you're doing this performance review, again, without to kind of labor it on, is what percentage of your inventory are you selling, and how many times have you changed price? And if you've changed price more frequently and you've managed to increase the amount of products you're selling, that's a potential indicator that actually your pricing strategy is working. You're opening up more of your product sets to sales.
Unless you have hard margin constraints, and then you're selling a lot more units at a lower margin, bring your average margin down. And it's this is what we were talking about at the beginning about joined up thinking and ensuring that kind of what is a good tactical decision lines up with your overall business KPIs. So your yearly business cycle that's dictating the goals for you and your department lines up with the work you're doing on the ground, because it's and we've done this with people and had to unpick it. But your happy days, you move a lot more. You move products they weren't selling. You start shifting things in the marketplace, but that kind of has a knock on their overall reporting, and then you need to be able to kind of support that conversation as they communicate the impact of pricing back into the organization, right? Yes, sure, we might have dropped average margin by a percentage point, but profitability is through the roof, and this is the reason why. And you draw nice charts and always put things going up and to the right, but like I think that bit is that's where, kind of to use that phrase, where the rubber meets the road for me, in that's the bit where I often think pricing strategies come unstuck, and not through the failure of the implementation of the pricing strategy, but because the pricing strategy implemented is not the correct strategy for the business. And so if we loop back to our checklist, what should you be doing on the monthly? You should be making sure that your pricing strategy that you've implemented is supporting those core goals. So if, as Philip said, if you're growth minded, if you're trying to take a market, I'm looking at dead stock. Are things moving? Am I shifting things? Am I freeing up space in my inventory to get new products in? Fantastic, right? Conversely, if you're looking for profitability growth, am I nudging or maintaining my margin up? Am I selling more at what's maintaining that margin? And that's two very clearly different strategies, right?
Yeah, you're asking. It's basically at each stage we're asking a ton of questions. That's what we're doing, and we're you should be creating. One thing I talk a lot to my team here about is anything you do. Let's set a hypothesis. I've been listening to you as well, Rob. Anything you do, set a hypothesis. Okay, enact the change. Was the hypothesis true or false? Did it work? Did it not work? And that's what fundamentally you should be you're trying to instill across your daily decisions, across your weekly and monthly and yearly decisions. So you've gone there from a yearly point of view, and what are the sort of some of the questions you should be asking yourself to keep a theme at a yearly cycle?
Yeah, sure. So your business will have objectives, right? We've already touched on that. And the questions you should be asking yourself, we say yearly because that really is when people tend to make broad strategic decisions, and then they leave them for a year and come back. If your business works differently, if it's quarterly, if it's 6 monthly, as Philip says at the minute, it's probably the frequency is a lot more often. You should be asking yourself, how do I line my pricing strategy up with this? So this is where you pick your broad strategic pricing objectives for the year, and then drill all the way down into how do I get the technology in to support this? What technology should I be using? What tooling should I be using? How do I do this operationally? All those big things that you can then spend the year in testing and learning and ensuring that it lines up against those business goals. So I'm a product guy, right? So this year we get into like the tech OKR, KPI kind of things. So, but what are your objectives? What are the key results from those objectives? And what are the metrics, the key performance indicators that you're going to look to measure them? And if you're not, other frameworks are available. We use something slightly different internally, and we trim it down a bit because we're a smaller business, not hundreds of thousands of people across the world. But really, we've got core goals, and we make sure that everything we do aligns with them. Pricing is no different. Your business has core goals. How does pricing support those core goals? What are the metrics that support that allow you to measure that? And then that lets you get into that monthly and daily cycle of ensuring that your strategy is optimizing that, and that your products are being optimized or fit alongside it. Because the real fundamental is that if you don't have a strategy, you don't have a benchmark, so you can't measure anything against it, or it's internal, or even if it's like in your head, it's difficult because you think, well, what was I doing 12 months ago? Whereas if you kind of operationalize it, get the data out there, record it, measure it, you can then start doing the kind of historical analysis, looking back what's worked and what hasn't worked. And then this is why we're kind of coming at it from both ends to get all the way back to the daily, weekly, monthly cycle of ensuring that this strategy lines up.
Oh, I couldn't say it better myself, Rob. It's really the questions like, have I got the tools in place to support my objective? And if you're at the start of pricing your decisions and you have a feel for where you're in the market, do I have the right vendor to support me to get access to competitor data? And that starts those decisions. And then once you've got that tool to assess the market, you can go back to what we said earlier of asking these initial questions of how is my day-to-day movement in the market changing, and so forth, without repeating what we said sort of 30 minutes ago.
And it's really important to loop back to the maturity thing, because it's one of those big questions is what resources do I have to support this, or how much investment should I make in this? Because to be quite honest, if you're a smaller business, you're more likely to be investing your money in ad spend and growth through that way, because that will give you more growth than initially, certainly, than pricing will, which is more of an optimization piece. Then I'd say you can actually seriously reinforce that ad spend by tacking on pricing software, but the pricing software you require will not be the same as a very sophisticated enterprise solution. It might be in a few years when you've tapped that out and scaled up, but and it is those kind of questions and that kind of framework you should be building out. So if your answer is, okay, well, we're doing it by hand, but this is the broad strategy, absolutely fine. Like, similarly, we were going to use a repricer, fine, or we're going to heavily invest, and this is going to be a strategic objective for us. There is no like right or wrong. I mean, obviously, I'd like you to buy our software and come work with us, but like, there's no kind of right or wrong if it fits your business at the time. It's making sure, though, where it does get right and wrong is that what you're doing on the ground, on the daily and the weekly, when you're actually kind of fighting a good fight, lines up with that strategy. Because if the overall business has decided they're not investing in pricing, but what that's knocked onto is that there are 4 people spending all their days in managing Excel spreadsheets just because of the pure automation task, that conversation needs to be had and pushed back up so that when the strategic stuff is reviewed, you think, okay, well, we better look at some tooling because that's saving us four bodies worth of man hours a week or whatever.
And in that case, an automation, a tool that can implement some of the rules that they're doing is the place to start. I like what you said. It's kind of, Rome wasn't built in a day. You set your objectives. You collect data from the market. You test, learn, optimize, find your position in the market. Once you've played around with competitor data, what next? You might have hit a glass ceiling. So therefore, you want to start testing other things. And you touched upon it earlier, didn't you, Rob? Of let's see if we can throw in stock in. Can I use stock data to have a play with pricing? The question I'm asking, the hypothesis that I'm setting in this particular scenario is, if I monitor what the stock that I have, and in some markets you can have access to what your stock your competitors have, can I use that as an advantage to change my price when supply chains are constrained and extract more ka-ching? I was going to say I don't want to extract more money out of that exchange. All fundamentally you're doing is you're asking additional questions. You're pushing that glass ceiling up and up and up to try and extract more value and get more out of pricing. Now, it might be that actually, and we've got a number of customers that have actually asked these additional questions, and actually the value of the spend in which asking these questions is not right for their market. They get a lot out of just the competitor data, whereas other people actually, the competitor data is just table stakes, and for them to win, for them to grow, for them to get market share, they absolutely have to keep asking questions, push the boundaries, and a lot of the time these markets are kind of venture backed and there's tons of money getting thrown at it. I'm talking the likes of sort of sporting goods in particular, a lot of PE activity going in there. So a lot of clever people are getting thrown into these organizations, and it is a moon race, is it? I don't know
and I think people often forget that they can optimize all parts of the pricing chain, because one of the things we see that I think is under talked about is it comes back to the suppliers or markets such as tire sales, where you've got really complicated supply structures, rebates, lots of stuff going on. Just automating that process so that you can ensure that your prices are live and cost prices are being changed and adjusted accordingly. Even now, and this is where you kind of get into, we didn't do intraday, but for some people or in some industries, pricing intraday or pricing hourly or to the minute is super important. And that's where you have these either very, very tight margins. So that the classic example of that is the stock market, right? So the high frequency trading arms race of getting, if you can get ahead of people, you can get there that little bit before, and it all adds up if you move enough volume. We don't tend to move enough volume for that really to be the play in e-commerce. But what we do often see is highly volatile supply chains where prices can change quite dramatically in quite a short period, and it is really important to pass those on. And if you're getting to the point where your pricing decision is an hourly one, man, you better get some automated tooling, because otherwise someone's having a bad day every day.
Download equals open bracket. That's a hard life. Upload spreadsheet. So great. So I think, was there anything more you'd like to add, Rob? Should we leave
No,
it there
I think this is actually a really good one to end the 30th, kind of the first season on, in the sense that there's a whole host of stuff you can do depending on how you, with what complexity you view pricing. But the real takeaway from me is just set your business objectives and ensure your strategy lines up, and then your frequency really is the tactical around to the gradient from tactical to strategic, and making sure that everything is lined up with that continually. But I'm a data scientist, so that's how I view the world. But I think it's probably useful.
Test and learn, test and learn, test
Exactly.
and learn. So thank you very much, Rob. Can't quite believe we've made it to 30 episodes, but there we go. There we go. I hope everyone...
hours of us chatting noise.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed it nonetheless. So pricing is all about testing, learning, asking the right questions, not being afraid to make mistakes, and just putting one foot in front of the other. Because, as I said yesterday, it's a snowball effect. So keep making those changes and keep asking the questions. And at the end of it, you'll sit back and go, bloody hell, I've contributed some good performance to my business, haven't I? And we shall end there. Thank you very much, Rob, as ever. We've been BlackCurve. This is our podcast, E-Commerce Matters. Take care. See you next time. Bye-bye.